This is by far the most rushed episode yet. I'll give it credit though, because the episode was amazing in terms of the anime's standards and even my first time viewing it. I'm also sure that anime-onlys loved it, but everything was squished together and a total of around 8 chapters were skipped in this episode alone. A lot of plotlines were either outright skipped or all added into one to save time. Essentially, the point is that even though the episode was great, the original work in the webtoon had so much potential that unfortunately the anime just couldn't live up to. So I'll be going over everything the anime skips to give you guys a fuller understanding of the story. God of High School Episode 10, Oath/Meaning, covering chapters 69 through 85. The pre-opening scene was Ilpyo's flashback, and it was pretty much from chapter 79 in the webtoon. It was primarily the same besides some details which I'll cover a little later in the video. Overall, I think it was pretty good, and for now I have no complaints with this scene in the anime. After the opening, we get into chapter 69, and in the anime, Judge P is interrogating fake Team Jeju by herself. At the same time as this interrogation is happening, Mujin explains the situation to the Capital Team. And for the anime onlys, the Capital Team just refers to the team of Mori, Daiwi, and Mira. It's just easier to say Capital Team rather than referring to them by their names every time. And even in this scene, the webtoon takes a much different approach, and in my opinion, a much better approach. It really also sets the seeds for what will happen in the rest of the episode and the rest of this arc in general. To start out, Mujin is with Judge P during her interrogations. As the interrogation's happening, one of the fakes has a message for Mujin from his boss, Mandya. The message essentially just says that Mujin is always a step behind. This scene alone was so important in building the tension between Mandyak and Mujin, and also just some tension between Nox and the Six in general. Mujin didn't like this message and revealed that he was actually ahead of Mandyak by calling 2 judges, receiving intel that they just wiped out a Nox camp. Then we naturally transfer over to Mandyak's perspective, and he proves that he's actually ahead, showing that he already has one of the keys and they're currently being baptized. And this key that's currently being baptized is actually the person that trained Mansyok in Northern ITF Taekwondo, also the same person that trained Bora, the girl from Jagal's team in Northern ITF Taekwondo. And one thing that I'll give the anime credit for is we already got hinted to her affiliation with Nox a couple episodes ago when we first got the reveal of Nox. And after this scene, Manduk's further discussing with his Nox brothers and asks about Jagal. It seems like they're grooming Jagal to eventually join Nox since they have an affinity for his Chariok. And this scene was also very important to me because it really just shows Nox's goals with Jagal and really why Jagal's a proper villain now instead of just some random antagonist. All of the things that I just discussed were already changed, and the episodes only lasted for like 10 seconds or so up till this point. I really liked how in the webtoon, Mujin and Mandyak were essentially playing 8D chess, and it's almost like a cat and mouse game where they're just going back and forth trying to get the key first. And in the anime, unfortunately, all of this was just dumbed down and removed. Now on to the big changes. So essentially, all of chapters 70 through 76 were skipped in the anime. This is primarily because of changes to the structure of the tournament in the show, because in the show the tournament is more of a straightforward single elimination bracket, but in the webtoon it's more of a point system where each of the teams will fight different opponents a couple times, and then the team with the most points will go against each other at the end in the finals. Besides these changes, the other stuff that was skipped in the episode is just because the season was limited to 13 episodes. So I'm just gonna run through these chapters to give you guys a better idea of everything that was going on. Chapter 70 opens up with Mori in a hospital bed healing from his last match, and this is one change that I really can't excuse the show for whatsoever. So last week we had Mori doing the acupuncture on himself so he wouldn't feel any pain for the next 2 hours, and after his body just went through a brutal beating, there was nothing from it. In the anime, this was just super unrealistic because the technique that he did on himself was portrayed to be super dangerous and super taxing on his body, but there were no consequences. So this is another thing that I really like that was implemented into the webtoon. After the scene of Mori in the hospital, we get the next match, which is the Capital Team versus the Gangwon Team. And this match was completely cut from the anime, and there's no possibility of it being shown in the anime in a later date. It's because the anime already stated that Mori's team versus Ilpyo's team was the semi-finals, so there's not really another opportunity for this match to take place. And to be completely honest, nothing really stands out about this team, and they're not that important, but I think you really just can't have a show where you introduce teams into a tournament only to have them never fight in it. So all I'm trying to say is that if the anime wasn't gonna have this match in the show, they should have just not introduced this team in the first place. So in the actual match, Mori's able to pretty easily defeat the whole team by himself. He one-shots the first guy and basically two-shots the next. The next match is Yeonnam versus Yeonbuk. This match could be shown next week, but with God of High School's history, I really doubt it. In this match, Jagal was able to beat the whole team by himself, and it's noted that this is the second person that Jagal has injured beyond recovery, the first being Jugok from a couple episodes ago. Now moving on to chapter 71. At the beginning of the chapter, there's a small scene with Ilpyo and Sungyeon. They're in Sungyeon's either hospital room or maybe therapy room, and they're just discussing the future of Ilpyo's match and potentially fixing her leg. Sungyeon falls and Ilpyo catches her, and after Ilpyo catches her, Sungyeon gets very mad because she doesn't want to lose her independence. This is especially tough for her because she's someone who used to look out for Ilpyo and actually helped him grow in the past, so to now see Ilpyo not only surpassing her in strength, but her also just not even being able to walk is just very tough for her. There's some potential that we could get this scene in next week's episode if Ilpyo has another flashback, but we probably just will not. And the next fight is Jeonnam versus Chungbuk, and this fight is definitely cut from the anime. This is like how I was saying earlier, in the anime it's a simple bracket, while in the webtoon it's more of a point-based thing, and this team was already eliminated by Mori's team in the anime, so there's no chance that this is ever going to be shown. The most important thing about this fight is we finally get some gas for the criminally underutilized Hyunbuk, and he goes off in his match against Gadong. The match lasted around half a chapter, and it was a pretty good fight, and Hyunbuk was actually able to defeat Gadong. Hyunbuk stays in the match and he fights against Jongmi. Their fight rolls into chapter 72 of the webtoon, but their fight was interrupted with Bora's encounter with Daiwi in the bathroom. This encounter took up all of chapter 72 and half of chapter 73, but it was already covered in last week's episode. One thing that I want to point out in this scene that wasn't in the anime was the prominence of Jigal's third member. Here in the webtoon, he's shown as having some kind of chariot that allows anti-gravity, or at least floating on certain inanimate objects. And to me, it was just really cool that we got this extra character detail, but I understand why this was cut since he's not very prominent in the story, but I think it's also good that the webtoon hyped him up a little bit just to subvert the audience's expectations for him. After this scene, we get back to the fight between Hyunbuk and Jongmi. They had a pretty long fight and the action was great. Hyunbuk ends up winning the match, and this just makes him seem a lot more worthy of being Ilpyo's teammate, since not only did he beat two people, he beat someone in Jongmi that even Mira had a somewhat hard time against. The rest of the chapter was Daiwi cooking for Judge Q and asking him for training. This was covered a couple episodes ago, so this also isn't too big of a change. And now on to chapter 74. This chapter was full of important character interactions, which were all skipped in the anime, and we really don't have a chance of them showing it ever in the future. The chapter opens up with Q training Daiwi. He tells him that communication with a god is the first step in getting a chariot, so he sends Daiwi to get 100 females' numbers at the mall in order to practice communication. And he tells him that if he's not able to do this, Q won't be able to continue training him. And yeah, I get that this is just a funny gaggish thing in the webtoon, but it's also nice seeing how Daiwi got a power rather than just him randomly having it in the anime. In the next scene, Ilpyo meets with Mori. They have a discussion of why they're in the tournament in the first place, and Ilpyo finds out Mori's wish is to save Taijin and live with him. This might not seem like that big of a deal being cut, but it makes sense as to why Ilpyo is now even more conflicted during his fight with Mori, since he also owes a lot to Taijin and shares a goal of trying to help him in the future. We also get a hint that establishes as to why Ilpyo wants to kind of train and elevate Mori. It's almost as if Ilpyo's starting to recognize that he might not be able to beat Jagal again by himself, but Mori has the potential to defeat him, so he wants Mori to be prepared in case something like this happens. It also might be that Ilpyo still thinks he can beat Jagal, but he just realizes that there are gonna be a lot more people like Jigal and Mori's journey from this point on, so he needs to be trained and elevated to deal with people that have killing intent while fighting him. And the next scene is all about Nox versus the Six. Mandiok tells his followers that essentially they've been in the shadows for too long and now it's time for them to take drastic measures to reclaim the world. The conversation is beautifully paralleled by Mujin as he gathers all of the judges from different regions and tells them that it's now kill on sight with any Nox members and they can go all out from now on. Mujin and Mandiok also both say that the main goal is to kill the leaders, so Mandiok wants all of the Six wiped out while Mujin wants all of the Bishop wiped out. Then we get the iconic panel of both of them saying let the holy war begin, and from here on out the two factions just start hunting each other. This panel being cut from the anime was a very big mistake, and the build-up was just so good in the webtoon. The anime encounter just felt very forced and shooed into the story randomly, unlike it did in the webtoon. This is what I'm talking about, how the anime gets some of the major points but misses everything that it took to get there. The antagonistic relationship between Nox and the Six and Mujin and Mandiok really just doesn't make sense or have any emotional impact in the anime. But in the webtoon we're at least given some backstory and some other interactions between them building up to this big war breaking out. While last chapter's cuts involved removing a lot of important character interactions, this chapter was just full of entirely cut scenes. The first scene was building towards a mini arc with Jugok. Jugok sitting in the hospital bed after suffering the injury from Jigal, and he's completely lost his ability to use his Chariok. And without some of this detail about Jugok, if they include the mini arc with him in the anime, it really won't make any sense with scenes like this being cut. The next scene is part of the Holy War with the judges and Nox clashing. Unlike in the anime, this actually seems like a war since there are a lot of small battles happening simultaneously. We get to see Q and R fighting together, which is always cool as they're taking out dozens of Nox members with ease. Throughout this battle, we also get a lot of nice action shots with Q, R, and even some of the other judges. It's really nice that we got a whole section of a chapter dedicated to the judges, because in the anime, all we really got was them taking out some fodder Nox members while Mujin, Mandiok, and Hallgang were clashing. And in the webtoon, as all of this is happening, Nox also invades the tournament, but Mujin easily puts them all to sleep. This encounter rolls into chapter 76, where Mujin easily defeats the person that was trying to help everyone invade into the arena. And in the meantime, we get some more scheming from Mandiok. Mandiok went to Jugok's room and gave him some kind of mysterious power, and this plays a very important role into a future mini-arc, which again will make absolutely no sense without this scene. And then we get to the fight between Team Mori and Team Ilpyo. This fight is also really different in the webtoon because Mori's team is heavily nerfed. First of all, Daiwi is still banned, so it's a 2v3, and also Mira doesn't have her sword back yet. The first match is Mori versus Hyunbuk, and since Hyunbuk has been portrayed a lot better in the webtoon, this is actually a pretty entertaining fight since he's a lot more threatening than he is in the anime. The fight rolls into and covers around the first half of chapter 77, where Mori obviously wins. So now, after 8 skip chapters, the webtoon and anime are at least relatively close, even though there's still a lot skipped in the anime. First, starting off with the initial interaction between Mujin and Mandiok. Even though they want to kill each other, they're a lot more amicable initially in the webtoon, which strongly implies that they have a deeply connected past. Then we get the really cool scene of Mujin's cross blocking Mandiok's sword, and this is the first part of the episode where I'd say the anime was just as good as the webtoon. The music and animation quality of this scene in the anime also really added to its overall effect. The chapter closes with Hallgang's arrival, which is also very nicely done in the anime. All of chapter 78 just covers Hallgang and the homeless society attacking the sword, and I will say it was a lot better in the anime. This is because we could actually hear the music, which played a very huge factor in my enjoyment of the scene in the anime. I really liked how the camera was moving, switching scenes, Hallgang shooting off all of his attacks at the sword, and all of that stuff was just a lot nicer in the anime, as it should be, since scenes typically should be better in the anime than they are in the webtoon. But moving on to chapter 79, it was just a flashback of Ilpyo, Sungha, and Sungyeon from the beginning of the episode. The main change in the webtoon was that the flashback was a lot longer, as we saw the interactions between Ilpyo, Sungha, and Sungyeon from when they were very young. Although this scene was changed in the anime, I can't really complain about it too much, as I didn't really care for this scene when it was first shown in the webtoon. Then chapter 80 covered the fight between Mori and Sungha. This is actually the exact same as the fight between Daiwi and Sungha, the difference just being that it was Mori in the webtoon while it was Daiwi in the anime. We even got all of the same scenes of Sungha attacking Mori's ear, just like she struck Daiwi's ear in the anime, and also just the diagrams with all of the ear stuff. And then finally chapters 81 through 85. These chapters in the webtoon covered Mori versus Ilpyo up to Ilpyo's transformation. The fight was really good in the anime, but just for me personally, I liked it a lot more in the webtoon. Since it was so much longer in the webtoon, there was also just a lot more detail, and every strike was just that much more impactful. And I know people don't like to hear this, but the triple kick is still to me better in the webtoon. The triple kick is improving as they're adding the colors in the anime, but to me it still just hasn't matched the quality that it had in the webtoon. There's just something about seeing all the after images of Mori and Ilpyo clash that I really liked in the webtoon that unfortunately wasn't in the anime. And I think it's such an easy fix. You can have the triple kick just as they have it in the anime, and then after do a slow motion or just something where it shows all of the three after images clashing. And that's it for the episode. Overall, I did enjoy the episode while watching it, but after rereading the chapters in the webtoon, there's really no excuse for an adaptation this poor. It's like they just had some bullet points that they needed to hit and got rid of the rest of the story. Share your opinions in the comment section below, and if you want to keep up with God of High School and all my future content, don't forget to like and subscribe.